Good morning. Today we are going to have our fourth lecture in the Introduction to Management course. So let's start our lecture with talking about which chapter we'll be discussing and have a teaser or an interesting point of view about the chapter, and then talk about our learning objective and start discussing the chapter itself. Today's chapter is about one of the most trending topics in management and non-management as well. It addresses the concept of social responsibility and managerial ethics. The reason why such a topic is getting a lot into the forefront of discussions is mainly due to the lot of problems that are happening due to the corporate world. We see that in the form of contamination to the environment or pollution. We see that in the spillovers or the effects that the works and the operations of the organization affect other different stakeholders or different related parties affected by their operations. So hence the word spillover, which means that the effect of the work of the company is affected where it spills onto others. And as well, we see a lot of ethical considerations that do affect the different stakeholders, such as the scandals or embezzlements or corruption cases. So all these are things that are really out there in the business world, in all kind of companies, aside of the sector, aside of the context or the country where operations are undertaken. Hence, today's topic is really interesting to all organizations. So let's move on now to our learning objectives. First, we will try to address the concept of corporate social responsibility to decipher and understand it. We will move to the concept of green management, and we would go into discussing ethical behavior, what it is and how can organization work on encouraging it, and then we will have a focal point on the Arab region and tap into the ethics and corporate social responsibility or CSR in the Arab world, which is really an important thing that affect operations in our region. So the concept of social responsibility itself is not a highly sophisticated one, but it's more about managers' concern in taking decisions while considering different dimensions of social responsibility. So they take into concern, while they are taking any kind of decisions, different employee relations, different pricing considerations about the market, different issues about resource conservation or protecting resources that are being depleted from the environment, protecting product quality and safety to protect the consumers by turn, and as they are doing their business operations in countries that do not place high concern or value on the human rights, they put this at their forefront. That's why they focus on the 3 P's: profit, planet, and people, which is extremely important to have and run accurate and successful business operation while taking in the consideration of CSR or corporate social responsibility. So if we take a look on the development of the concept of corporate social responsibility, we would see that there are 2 different points of views. First of all, we have a classical view of social responsibility that more or less was equivalent to a social obligation. And then we had a more developed or modernized view of social responsibility, which was a socio-economic view. And that socio-economic view was resembling to 2 developments, which was social responsiveness and social responsibility. So to distinguish between both views with their 3 different interpretations, let's discuss it more in our next slide. If we have a look here on the development from the classical view up till the socio-economic view, we would see social obligation. This is the stage where firms get into social actions because they simply fulfill it as an obligation. They want to meet up with certain economic and legal responsibilities that they have to do. nothing more. They are not doing it out of benevolence, they are not doing it out of responsibility. No, it's a transaction, it's an obligation that they have to dwell into. And then we have the second phase, moving to the socio-economic view, social responsiveness, which is the stage when firms engage in different social action due to a response to a popular social need. So this means that beyond the economic and legal responsibilities of companies, as organizations feel that there is a social need in the context that they do perform in or they do their business in, they come up and respond to this demand or to this requirement of the society. And if a company selects to go one step further, this means that it had moved to the social responsibility, where this is the business's intention to dwell into social actions that go beyond the legal, the economic, and social demands or social needs, and they are in the act of doing the right things for the greater good or the greater benefit of all, for the society and others. So this is the progression or the development of organization from the classical social economic view, where they surpass social obligation, social responsiveness, and social responsibility. So if we take a look here on the two different views, we will see that in the classical view, the only social responsibility of a company is to maximize the profits, which is the basic objective of the existence of any business firm, the financial return. So it operates to its optimum interest or to the best interest of its stockholders, the owners of the corporation, only with the objective of profit maximization. And putting in any resources or spending, in other terms, on social good is unjustifiable. These are simply increased costs that would cut off from the profits that could be incurred to the owners and would raise the prices to consumers. So this is not endorsed under the classical view. Whereas from the socio-economic view, a management's social responsibility is something beyond making profits. We should include others within the society. We should take consideration for its welfare. We should protect and improve the society. So the corporations here are not only entitled and responsible towards their stockholders. No, they have a broader spectrum of the stakeholders, all those at stake, and the firms here shows a moral responsibility to the larger society because it's involved in its social, legal, and political issues. So this is the greater good to do the right thing under the socio-economic view. This diagram shows us Carroll's CSR pyramid. Anyone who is operating on a managerial level is nowadays familiar with this classification of Carroll, where he simply develops on a pyramid shape the basic pillars or drivers of social responsibility that a firm should be walking with. The first or basic level is at the base of the pyramid, which is the economic responsibilities. So simply, this is the foundation of all. The basic driver for the existence of a company is to be profitable, and this is definitely required by the society. It's a basic. And as well, fulfilling legalities, or in other words, obeying laws and regulations and bylaws, is something essential. So this is yet required by society. And then moving to the third category or third level, which is the ethical responsibility. And that's an expectation, because not all firms have to go through that or dwell into ethical responsibility to do what's presumed to be just and fair, to avoid doing harm to anyone. So that's an ethical responsibility. And if we look at the philanthropic responsibility, which is something aspired and desired by society, like in doing the greater good and being a good corporate citizen, this is going the one step beyond. This is the benevolence concept. If we try to reflect on the earlier classical view and the second socio-economic view here, we would see that the classical view applies on the economic and legal responsibilities. These are requirements by society to satisfy the reason for existence of companies and to satisfy legal requirements. So this is the classical view, whereas trying to do the just, the fair, avoiding harm, doing the one step further, the ethical and philanthropic responsibilities are classified under socio-economic views. So, as we had discussed the concept of corporate social responsibility and we had developed its progression from the classical view to the socio-economic view and its components is three levels or drivers: the economic, the legal, the ethical, and the philanthropic. It seems that there are diverse forces that would drive for CSR. So, why is it something that we are questioning? Why are people with and people against? There are arguments for each of them, so let's have a look at each. For those in favor or for CSR, we see that there are public expectations or others in the society and the greater population rather than the stockholders of the company that have aspirations. So fulfilling them is positive to the organization. This means that their public image would be polished and enhanced. This would mean that their ethical obligations are fulfilled. This would mean that they would work for the development and the protection of the environment and as well enhancing and bettering it. This would be reflected on their longer term profits and earnings. This would mean that stockholder interests are catered for, and yet a point plus all stakeholders' interests are protected. It would mean that there would be measures undertaken in order to prevent any further negative actions undertaken from the side of the government, because we are being proactive now. So all of these are points plus or arguments for corporate social responsibility. So what about the other side of the equation? What about the against or the negativities? We would see that it would violate the concept of profit maximization, because whatever kind of expenses that I would allocate to such programs, this would come from earnings. So there is a violation of the concept of profit maximization, but short-term one. There is a delusion of purpose, because now I don't have only my eyes set on the goal of profit maximization or leading the market, but as well I want to add other sub-objectives. So now I have diverse ones, of course entailed costs, and maybe there is a lack of skills in order to undertake the needed corporate social responsibility efforts. Finally, there is a lack of accountability, where so the question here is, does it really pay off? Since we just discussed about the points of the positives and the negatives, or the for and against CSR, both sides or arguments are there. Does it really pay off? Well, yes. Studies showed a positive relationship or correlation and an association between being involved in CSR and the economic performance of firms. It's really difficult to measure social responsibility, and economic performance raises issues of validity and causality in such studies. Nonetheless, a positive association or relationship is there, and this is really showing to all of us whenever we hear about companies that are top performance or environmental friendly. This really pays off in the economic performance of firms. Generally, a firm's social action cannot harm its long-term performance, but it rather enhances it, and it would lead to long-term profits eventually. So as we had discussed, corporate social responsibility pays off. The causality itself is really hard to prove, but the high association between CSR adoption by organization and financial payoff is there. So let's look from another point of view. What about the trust? How is it developed? What's the mechanism or what's the mediator? Something that happens in between, so that CSR could really relate to and lead to increased performance as in economic terms. This would be probably trust. As per a highly reputable trust barometer that collects data from different countries worldwide, called the Edelman Trust Barometer, it actually collected data on different time zones, as you can see here, as per your textbook, from 2012 to 2016, and it had calculated the level of trust that reflects the incidence rate of CSR effort by businesses. As you see, business here is the black line, the third one from the bottom, and it shows that as the level of CSR adoption and performance increases by organization, the level of trust increases. More than 50% of the global respondents had showed trust in business and in government, and how it escalated up in 2016. So that's really interesting. Let's see how the Edelman Trust Barometer had developed forward, and how its results had ended after what's going around in the world. Actually, as we said, there are four different partners whom Edelman's resource or Edelman's Trust Barometer do collect data for: the government, the media, the NGOs, and the businesses. And as we can see, there is a huge change in all countries from the results that they had until the 2020 till 2021. These are the 2021's results as per Jan. The Arab region itself is represented in one country, though not quite an accurate representation, but it gives us an overall view. We can see Saudi Arabia here, where there is a decrease in the level of trust. If we look at May 2020 to Jan 2021, this is the time frame that the data is collected. Government was the most trusted in May, then it lost its lead 6 months later in Jan 2021. The lead moved from the government to someone else. So, can you guess whom had that been? So, as per the Edelman Trust Barometer, as we had indicated, government is no longer the most trusted party or organization surveyed. Actually, now they are businesses. Businesses turned out to be more trusted than governments in 18 out of the 27 countries, thus taking the lead, followed by NGOs, government, and media. So this is a list of some of the top social responsible initiatives that had been conducted by organization as of 2018. Interestingly, you'll find that Marc Jacobs, which is a fashion industry producer, is a leading one, as well as Indigo, IKEA, Abercrombie and Fitch. You will find along the way Bosch with its multi-appliances producer, LinkedIn, Ben & Jerry's, the ice cream one, Starbucks, Apple of course, Coca-Cola, and many, many others. So let's have a look on how they are operating, or what kind of initiatives they are providing. Well, we can find Marc Jacobs actually is partnering with SATO, which is a charity or an NGO that's dedicated at rescuing abandoned dogs in Puerto Rico. Well, where they get them placed with different owners or new owners who can adopt them. If we go down the list and go and look at Starbucks, actually Starbucks has an initiative with farmers where it supplies and provides coffee trees to farmers as a part of the Conservation International Sustainable Coffee Challenge. So as they do so, they hire or they plan to hire tens of thousands of refugees in different countries over a span of 5 years and seniors, so that by the year 2025 they can reach hiring 10,000 refugees and 25,000 veterans who are individuals that are unemployed. And as well, they are reaching out to the farmers and helping them out. Another company that's handling CSR really in a commendable way is Coca-Cola, and it has its own foundation as well. Starbucks has its own foundation where they developed a completely separate NGO that handles CSR for them, and they give back 1% of the profits in Coca-Cola to the communities around the world that they usually operate in. And they encourage their employees to donate as well. So lots of things are handled by such corporations. This concludes our discussion for the first point, the corporate social responsibility. And moving to our second, talking about the green management. We have to recognize that there is a directly close link between organizational decision making and the activities that they undertake and its impact on the natural environment and surroundings. So global environmental problems that usually face managers manifest in air pollution, water pollution, soil pollution, all of that from usage or from the production of toxic waste throughout the production process, and as well due to the usual air pollution, global warming effects from the greenhouse emissions happen, and natural resources get to be depleted because they are extinct, they diminish, and they will end at one point, so they are being depleted. And here comes the point of green management. There are different approaches for organizations to start on going green. The first approach is the legal or the light green approach. And this kind of approach is where firms simply do what's just legally required. They obey the laws, they follow the rules and regulations willingly and without any kind of legal challenge, but just doing what's needed. If companies select to go one step higher or go more green, they would go for a market approach, where under the market approach, firms go with customer preferences. So if the customers in Puerto Rico, for example, are for preservation of trees, they would go for that. If the customers in Africa, in an African country, say Morocco, are for air protection from the environmental pollution, they would go for that. So here, under the market approach, firms respond to customer preferences for producing and for undertaking environmentally friendly decisions. Next, we see the third and the fourth approach, which is an escalation or a step higher for going green, which are the stakeholder and the activist approach. First, let's discuss the stakeholder approach, where under it we can see firms working to meet the environmental demands of the multiple stakeholders, which means all different individuals, groups of individuals who are affected by their decision making, be it the stockholders, the employees, the suppliers, the community. If a company selects to go even more than that, then it is looking for ways to earn respect and secure it, as well as preserve the environment and being actively and socially responsible. This is known as the extreme activist or the dark green approach. For example, companies can use biodegradable plastics, which are plastics that are actually fade away and ferment the soil, or a company like Armax that uses plastic delivery packages that are biodegradable, or even running cars with low emission vehicles, or having more green consumption of oil office supplies, for example. All of these are different examples for firms to go on a dark green approach. So if we are looking at the environmental sensitivity scale, we can see that it's really low on the legal approach or the light green, going a little up on the market approach, and then further on the stakeholder approach, and definitely high on the activist approach or the dark green one. So if we want to have a look on companies in different fields and domain that do undertake green initiatives or green management, we can have a look on McDonald's, which is a fast food provider, and it goes green in different forms. It actually selects to go on energy efficient appliances, so it reduces the waste energy by 20% in overall business activities worldwide. It provides green parking lots for hybrid vehicles that are environmental friendly, and as well it considers how it selects to secure its sources for meat, so that it would reserve or reduce any kind of negative implication on the animal habitats or where they live and breed. So that's an example. Another example is Dell, which is a huge manufacturer of computer equipment, and again it went with environmental impact to reduction in order to have its imprint on green management, and by doing so they have promoted safe disposal of their products, and they even went one step beyond and they secure that for any other manufacturer. So it's allowed for customers to give back any of their Dell branded equipment or any others for safe disposal to protect the environment. Also, Google had done a lot of effort in going green. This is seen in its own premises and its own offices, that to start off they preserve printing, they preserved usage of energy, and as well they launch continuous campaigns to encourage others to do so. As a big platform, they have the potential and they have the access to do such thing, and also they support a lot of green energy projects, and they do so in projects such as windmills and solar panels. So as corporations select to go green or endorse green management, how would they go through the process and evaluate that? One of the basics of evaluation of green management would be to get endorsed or to get certified. Using sustainability reporting guidelines to document the green action is needed, and that's usually headed and guided by the United Nations. In addition, adopting the ISO 14000, which is standard for environmental management, or ISO 9000 for quality management, and ISO 26000 for social responsibility are basic guidelines for evaluating green management and identifying that the organization itself is adopting green management. And another thing is that companies strive to be named as one of the most sustainable corporations in the world. And recently, Bank Audi had been nominated as one of these companies. So, as we had discussed our second topic, the green management, now we move to the third topic, which is managerial ethics. To start off, let's define ethics. Ethics are the basic principles, values, and beliefs that actually sets straight what is right and what is wrong. It's the fine line that defines what should be done and shouldn't be done. So, what is being ethical? How can we really put it into action? We put it into action by doing the right thing at the right time in the right way without being influenced with any force, be it internal or external. This is how we get to be ethical. But that's not quite feasible because ethical dilemmas happen, and this is the norm in everyday's life as individuals and as corporations. It's even more manifested and clear for corporations. Well, there are a set of things that actually determine what is ethical and what's unethical behavior. Whenever an individual is faced with an ethical dilemma, this is affected by the stage of moral development of an individual. As an individual is at a certain level of moral development, each of us has his own individual characteristics that stands out and differs from an individual to another. There are issues that we face that are extremely critical for some, and yet they are quite normal and unimportant to others. So the issue intensity is another factor that would affect would the eventual behavior be ethical or unethical. The culture itself that we are in, the context, the organizational culture, is it an acceptable norm? Is it an unacceptable thing? How is it dealt with and addressed in the culture? Affects whether the behavior is ethical or unethical. And finally, structural variables as well would affect would the behavior elicited be deemed ethical or unethical. Here are the three levels. We start from the bottom, pre-conventional, moving to the conventional, and then to more developed, principled level. People proceed these stages of moral development sequentially, so we cannot jump, we have to move gradually. And there is no guarantee that there would be a continuation of moral development up till we reach the final level of the principled one. Eventually, this means that most adults are in stage 4, which is identified as being a good corporate citizen. So step 1, or stage 1, the pre-conventional one, is where we just simply stick to the rule to avoid any kind of punishment, and we follow what's needed in the circle of our immediate interests. This is the first stage of moral development, the pre-conventional one. If we move to the second, the conventional one, we would see that it's more or less about meeting expectations of those directly in contact and close to you, and fulfilling the obligation to what you have initially agreed to, nothing more than that.
The first factor that would affect employees' ethics is the individual characteristics. We have values, which are basic convictions and belief system that the person have, distinguishing between right and wrong, true and false. So that's one part. Another is the personality, which can have two different dimensions affecting the ethics. First is the ego strength, which is how deep does a person's beliefs about his convictions are. Is he highly clinging to his belief system or not? Another aspect is the locus of control, and the locus of control is a personality attribute or a trait measuring the degree to which a person believes that he has control over his own life. So an internal focus of control, it's the belief that the person controls his own destiny, whereas an external locus of control is the belief that whatever happens to a person is due to external forces. It might be luck, it might be chance, it might be an upper force or God. So more or less, locus of control is answering or catering to the question of are you destined or predestined. The other factor affecting employees' ethics is the organizational structure variable. In here, comes the organizational characteristics and mechanisms and systems that happen and guide influencing the individual ethics of employees. So we can see, for example, the performance appraisal system, how a person is assessed in terms of his performance within an organization. So the mechanism governing that would affect the employee's ethics. The reward allocation system, how an organization sets up the system to reward employees accordingly. So this would affect the employee ethics, and as well role models or behaviors and ethics of managers. We always say that managers should come up to the expectation, they should practice what they preach. So the behavioral ethics of manager is really an important organizational structure variable affecting employee ethics. Another concept affecting employee ethics is the organizational culture, which brings the bottom line about the corporate values that are shared across the organization. This shows in the decisions and actions of its employees really, really high. This is the action manifestation of it. And as well, we have the intensity of the ethical issue, how important it is, how critical it is, the concepts of fairness, collaboration, cooperation, all of these tap into the intensity of the ethical issue. So to discuss more about the issue intensity, we can find that aspects such as probability of harm, how likely is the action to bring about harm and cause it to others, immediacy of consequences, will the harm be felt immediately or will it be delayed, proximity to the victims, how close are the potential victims to the employee who would be affected by the issue, concentration of the effect, how concentrated will the effect would be on the victims, how catastrophic or how great would the harm be and how many people would be harmed, consensus of wrong, how much agreement is there among others that this action is wrong. So all of these are things that do contribute to the development or to the measure of the issue intensity itself. Here are some recommendations for managers in order to improve the ethical behavior in any kind of organization. First of all, go on with selecting individuals who have already high ethical standards. This would make life much more easier and operations smoother in an organization. Second, develop codes of conduct and ethics and undertake decision rules that would make ethics endorsed and accepted as well as implemented throughout the organization. As we had just said, lead by example, or in other ways, practice what you preach. So as long as you want to infuse ethical behavior in an organization, practice it so that others will replicate. Realistic job goals are really important because setting things or setting objectives that can be attained is an important objective, and it would include ethics in performance appraisals included. Ethics training is really important because it puts into focus that it's something important within the organization if it's available, and yet induces others to practice it. Social audits are important, and if they are done independently, this would lead to an assessment of the level of ethical behavior in an organization, and it will encourage others and compel them to abide by ethical behaviors. Finally, Providing a support network for individuals facing ethical dilemmas is really crucial because this will allow people to echo their concerns about ethics, and it will make the environment more responsive toward ethical problems as well. We had just mentioned codes of ethics. So what are codes of ethics? Codes of ethics are a formal statement that an organization develops and writes up in its formal regulations and manual. It's more or less a manifestation of the organization's values and the ethical rules that it abides by, and it requires its employees to follow. It should be as specific as possible and show the employees the ethics that they are supposed to do things with, yet it should be loose enough to allow some freedom of judgment, so it cannot be really strict and rigid. The mere presence of a code of ethics does not guarantee that people will follow it, of course, but nonetheless, it's a respected effort that companies do exert in order to give due concern and attention to the importance of ethics that should be implemented within the organizational setting. This is a mere sample of how codes of ethics should look like. Part of it should be related to being an organizational citizen for the employee himself. So he should, for example, show courtesy, respect, honesty, and fairness. He should not use drugs or alcohol at work. He should exhibit good attendance and punctuality. So all of these are things that could be related to the employee himself as serving as a good citizen. Secondly, it should be about doing nothing unlawful or improper that might by any chances harm the organization. So everything should be in compliance with the law. Bribes are not allowed. Avoiding any wasted activity or activities outside the company that might impair or hinder the delivery of the objectives of the organization and such. Okay, and then we can have another set of codes of ethics that might be related to the greater good of the customers, which are, and of course, the end customer for any company, where we should perform any kind of assigned duty towards the customer to the best capacity and potential of the employees. Products and service should be provided at the highest quality with the best appropriate measures and terms and such. To have an effective use of the codes of ethics, there are some specific points or pointers that an organization should follow. First of all, appropriate behaviors should be modeled and rewarded to those who actually act ethically. Another point would be to communicate the codes of ethics on a regular basis to all employees, make sure that it's disseminated and clear to all. As well, managers should continuously keep on readdressing this point and how important they are, and consistently take action and discipline whoever violates the codes of ethics communicated by the company. So it shouldn't be only mere codes that are communicated or available in the company bulletin or preached only. It should be practiced and it should be revised. Another point is that the organization stakeholder, the different ones, employees, customers, and others, all of them should be taken into account whenever a code of ethics is developed and improved. If you recall our last slide, we were talking about codes of ethics in relation to the employee, to the customer, and to the organization and such. And also, another approach is to use the 12-question approach. And this is the 12 questions approach, which taps into the fact of, is the codes of ethics well defined and appropriate for the company addressing the different stakeholders or not? So it tackles points like defining problems accurately, as well as how situations had occurred, first place, and if it had been recurring, who would the decision or action injure, and other questions, of course. So as we are discussing ethics, talking about how it should be developed and infused in the company through the codes of ethics, and we had discussed about how we could make it really effective, we had reviewed an approach like the 12-question approach now. So why are we doing all that? What's the value of ethics and ethics training? The value is that it can really make a difference in infusing ethical behaviors in an organization. It would increase the employees' awareness of the different ethical issues and concerns related to different business decisions. It would clarify and reinforce the organization's standards of conduct, and it would help employees be more confident that they'll have the organization support whenever they are not going with the flow or taking an unpopular opinion. Nonetheless, it's ethically correct. So this would give them a backup at the point. So this closes the point whenever there is an ethical loophole or ethical lapse and social irresponsibility. Ethical leadership is really needed at the point. So in order to provide ethical leadership, a role model should be there, who is a person who's acting by ethics, who is acting as in telling the full truth always, and never committing manipulations and information or hiding and concealing data that's important, and he's willing to come up and admit to whatever kind of fault or failure he had done. So having a role model, sharing personal values, trusting on these shared values, and putting a reward system that would applaud ethical responsibility is really something important. Also, protecting employees who might raise ethical issues is really important because sometimes they are classified as whistleblowers. Whistleblowers are those who simply whistle in order to disclose an unethical issue or a social responsibility. They might be retaliated against, so providing a mechanism to protect them is yet another concern that's really important in organization to manage any irregularity of social and ethical irresponsibility. As we are discussing ethical behavior and codes of conduct, and we started our lecture by discussing social responsibility, and we brought in the concept of CSR or corporate social responsibility, it's worth that we shift our direction now to reviewing the concept in the Arab region. A very renowned institute, an international one known as Transparency International, do conduct annual assessment of corruption levels worldwide. And it develops an indicator or an index known as the Corruption Perception Index, CPI. This shows the country's rankings and score, and it has a scale ranging from 0 to 100, and it's usually a 10 scale index, so it's 0, 10, 10, 20, and so forth, up to reaching the point of 80, 90, 90, 100. So the closer a country's score gets to 10, the more transparent and the less corruption it has. Well, if we look to the Middle East and North Africa, we can see that its indices show that there is a problem of ethics or an ethics crisis in the region, and that's as per 2016 indices, as you can see. Studying corruption is important because the lower we have corruption in any country, this would lead to a better quality of life, there would be a proper use of resources, there would be high trust in business transactions, less costs, less costs in projects, less bribery. So all of that would mean that business transactions would be important, and all surveys indicate that actually businessmen would pay premium in order to trade with ethical partners. If we have a look here on the perception CPIs or corruption perception indices for the year 2019, you'll see that Egypt ranks on the 34th position among 180 countries. So why don't you have a look on the 2020, which is the latest release from the CPIs, and see where are we positioned now. Another phenomena that is evident in our Middle East North African societies that is a manifestation of sort of unethical behavior is wasta. Wasta means the intermediary usage. This is a feature in the Arab countries, and it has a lot of implication with managerial practices. It's more or less about a social process that plays a significant role in many Arab societies. It could give benefit to a person that might give him a head start over others, so it's sort of favoritism. So is it only an Arab phenomenon? Do you have any idea about its origin and what kind of consequences would it have in your opinions? All these are debatable point of views. If we are addressing the first point, is it only an Arab phenomena? With this terminology, yes, it's an Arab phenomena, but generally it's not a unique standalone phenomena in the Arab countries. We can find it with different names and terms worldwide, like Wangski in the Chinese One, it has an alternative term in the Russian culture as well. So yeah, the phenomena is there. It's not only Arab related. The consequences are a lot. The consequences are on the workplace, the consequences are on the fairness and objective procedure that people would have, and the chances that anyone could have in the workplace and outside of the workplace. So that's why it's really an important phenomenon that should be taken into consideration. So to clarify things, the problem of ethics in the MENA region had pointed out that there are several factors that caused it. First of all, the red tape or the stringent bureaucracy. Both of them came hand in hand and caused a rigid commitment to some redundant rules, we might say. Mismanagement of resources and waste as well had been a problem. Inefficiency in the usage of resources as well. Nepotism and favoritism given to friends and family irrespective of merit. And another manifestation of it in the workplace is wasta, especially in the hiring process. And the law or lack of resources as well as the implementation of the laws if they are there. So as social issues are really important, how can we raise awareness of that? The existence of social entrepreneurs in our environment is really important because they can raise such awareness. Social entrepreneurs are individuals or social enterprises are organizations who seek out any kind of opportunity to improve the society by using new innovative ideas and sustainable approaches that would bring about greater benefit to all. So, in other words, they want to make the world a better place, address a problem, and they have a driving passion to make that happen. An example for that is Injaz Egypt, which is a non-for-profit organization empowering young people here in Egypt to own their own economic success. It delivers a lot of programs in financial literacy, work readiness, and entrepreneurship, and it helped a lot in enhancing school curricula with programs designed to build capacity and enhance the level of the employee, the level of the student education and the young graduates. So this is an example for a social entrepreneur in Egypt. Also, businesses could raise awareness about ethics and social change and the importance of bringing about positive social change by adopting corporate philanthropy. Different campaigns that the companies do launch and the donations that they have as well as establishing their own foundation is something all coming under the umbrella of corporate philanthropy that would promote positive social change. For example, we find companies like Orascom have the Sawiris Foundation, which is its own charitable foundation that would direct and steer its own operations in this domain. We find companies, big companies, that would have their own donation handed out to different organizations, charitable ones or others. We find big campaigns that are directed towards specific causes, for example, environmental protection, led by banks, led by different big business entities. Also, one of the highly prevailing concepts is employee volunteering effort known as corporate social employee volunteering, where team volunteering is encouraged and individual volunteering during working hours as well is encouraged by different business organizations for employees to promote social change and have their own print in enhancing the societies that they work in. So, what about CSR in the Arab world? Let's try to understand it a little bit. The perception that we hold towards it. In our earlier lecture, we talked about its definition, what it is, but now let's talk about its meaning and how it's rooted in the Arab world. Many managers link it to the religious upbringing that they had had in both leading religions, either Islam or Christianity. In both religions, all individuals are deemed and required to help out each other in humanity. So in Islam, we find the practice of zakat, and in Christianity, we find tethering, and both of them require giving a portion of one's wealth and income to the poor and those in need. This is highly connotated and linked to CSR. Nonetheless, religious charity has a private religious connection. CSR should reflect corporate initiative, which go beyond personal drivers, so that this is the clear distinction between each of them. Nonetheless, for individuals in the Arab world, still the line is blurred. That's why CSR in the region seems to be driven by rational political choices rather than responding to societal expectations. How about in Egypt? Actually, in Egypt, many practitioners had listed CSR to religious perspective or philanthropy or simple charity, being a good neighbor. All of these had been some of the synonymous terms that individuals in Egypt had used to relate to CSR. Considering corporations, usually the CSR practice is conducted mainly via the person in or whoever is handling the market or PR department, so it comes from that, or the responsible party of the organization, be it the general manager or a deputy or responsible assigned to that. And very few companies have their own CSR departments, so it's not well strategically crystallized inside organizations. Nonetheless, we can find that there is an attention and concern in the Egyptian Stock Exchange, where it has its own listing endorsing sustainability concepts. So we have EGX and sustainability reports, and this applies for large companies and for small-sized companies as well. On reviewing the status of Egypt and CSR, we can see that Egypt is an active member of the United Nations Global Compact, which is the executive arm endorsing sustainability in different countries across the globe. This is more or less an initiative where organizations voluntarily pledge to commit to the basic concepts of protecting its workforce, the environment, different kind of stakeholders, abiding by legal regulations. And in Egypt, it has been established in 2004. It has around 91 participating organizations throughout all different sectors. For example, the educational institutions such as different universities are part of, different banks, different FMCGs, and others. Also, we can see a huge stress from the ILO, International Labour Organization, and from the Egyptian Federation for Industries about the concepts of CSR, especially with the Egyptian Federation for more labor intensive related CSR activity as well as sustainability. So they had launched as of 2015 afterwards a lot of exemplary case studies about successful organizations such as the ones that we see here who endorse and apply CSR activities in role model perspective or from a role model perspective for other companies to follow through and copy these success stories. So, hoping that our lecture today had been fruitful and educated you about the social responsibility concepts, CSR, and ethics. If you have any questions, do contact us, and thank you. See you next lecture.